The air in Lorenzo Vargas's mansion was thin, expensive, and smelled of champagne and contempt. In the center of the great hall, under a crystal chandelier that dripped light onto the guests, Lorenzo raised his glass. "And now, my friends," he said with a predatory smile, "a little entertainment, a demonstration of the variability of the human mind." He gestured to a dark corner where a woman in a cleaning uniform, Katerina, cowered beside her teenage son, Samuel. The invitation had been a cruel joke, a whim. The assembled elite laughed, a low, knowing sound. They expected a spectacle of weirdness. But then a famous guest astronomer, drunk and eager to join in the joke, pointed to an expensive telescope on the terrace and challenged, "Hey kid, find the Ring Nebula for us." Samuel, who hadn't said a word all night, walked over to the telescope. He didn't look through the eyepiece. He just adjusted the coordinates with a speed and precision that silenced the room. He stepped back and said in a clear, calm voice, "There it is. And by the way, your calibration lens is misaligned by 0.02 degrees. That's why your latest published images are blurred on the blue axis." The astronomer froze. The laughter died. The party stopped. "Where in the world are you watching this from? We want to know. If you've ever rooted for arrogance to be silenced by genius, subscribe to this channel." The story of how a boy used as a joke became the center of gravity in a Millionaire's universe is just beginning. Katerina's outburst was silent, a pain she carried on her tired shoulders every day. She was a widow who worked 2 jobs to support herself and Samuel, one of them as part of the night cleaning crew at Lorenzo Vargas's corporate empire. She was invisible, a shadow who emptied trash cans and polished the marble floors where the powerful walked. Her world was the smell of disinfectant and the sound of her own footsteps in empty hallways. Her son, Samuel, was her universe. A universe. That few understood. To the world, he was difficult, strange. But to Katerina, he was brilliant. She didn't understand the galaxies and quasars he read about obsessively, but she understood the passion in his eyes. She saw the way he found comfort in the order of the cosmos, a contrast to the chaos of their lives. The invitation to the party came as a shock. It came through a manager, casually. "Mr. Vargas heard you have an interesting son. He would like you to come to his annual party." Katerina, in her exhaustion and naivety, made the mistake of hoping. Was it a gesture of kindness? A chance for her son to meet important people? The spark of hope made her spend what little she had on a second-hand suit for Samuel and a simple dress for herself. The reality of the party was a nightmare. From the moment they walked in, they were treated like a curiosity. The stares, the whispers, the way Lorenzo Vargas introduced them, not as guests, but as entertainment. Katerina's outburst that night was the silent cry of a mother watching her son being turned into a zoo animal for the entertainment of cynical rich people. Every laugh was a stab in her heart. She felt guilty for bringing him there, for exposing him to such cruelty. She was trapped with no way to leave discreetly, forced to endure the humiliation, praying that Samuel, lost in his own world, would not notice the evil that surrounded him. She just wanted to disappear, take her son home, and protect him from that world that saw his genius as a joke. The seed of false hope had been planted with casual cruelty weeks before the party. Lorenzo Vargas was paying a nighttime visit to one of his office buildings and saw Katerina cleaning the floor. He also saw Samuel, who sometimes accompanied her and stayed in a corner reading astronomy books he had taken from the library. Vargas, bored, asked the boy what he was reading. Samuel, without looking up, recited the exact distance to the Andromeda galaxy and the number of its estimated stars. Vargas was not impressed by the genius, he was amused by the weirdness. He saw an opportunity for a new kind of entertainment. His parties were famous for their extravagance. He had hired everything from fire eaters to famous violinists. The idea of presenting an autistic savant as a circus attraction, a curiosity for his equally cynical friends, seemed new and exciting. He instructed his assistant to extend the invitation. The language used was deliberately ambiguous. It spoke of celebrating unique talents and appreciating the diversity of the human mind. For a woman like Katerina, who spent her life waiting for a stroke of luck, for an act of kindness, these words were like water in the desert. She clung to this hope with all her might. She imagined that perhaps Mr. Vargas, a man so powerful, had seen her son's brilliance and wanted to become a patron, Perhaps he would offer a scholarship. Perhaps he would introduce him to someone who could nurture his talent. That hope consumed her. She told her few friends. She daydreamed as she scrubbed the floor. The preparation for the party was a sacred ritual. Samuel's suit was carefully chosen at a thrift store, and she spent an entire night adjusting it. She instructed him on how to behave, how to be polite, how not to say anything strange. "This is our chance, Samuel," she said, more to herself than to him. Arriving at the mansion, with its iron gates and perfectly manicured gardens, was the culmination of that hope. It felt like they were entering a fairy tale, a world where their struggles could finally end. She didn't realize that they weren't being invited to the ball, they were being led to the cage. Hope was the bait, and the party was the trap. The central conflict of that night was a collision between two universes. The universe of Lorenzo Vargas, built on power, status, and the display of dominance, and the universe of Samuel, built on logic, patterns, and the quiet beauty of the cosmos. Lorenzo Vargas was a man who saw the world as his personal chessboard. People were pieces to be moved for his benefit or entertainment. He wasn't evil in the classic sense. He was worse. He was indifferent to the humanity of those he considered inferior. To him, Katerina and Samuel weren't a mother and son. They were a concept, an interesting story. The idea of a genius hidden in a strange body fascinated him, not out of empathy, but as a collector who finds a rare and bizarre artifact. His goal at the party was simple: to use Samuel's vulnerability to reinforce his own position as the master of the show, the man so powerful he could play with the lives and dignity of others. The party guests were echoes of Lorenzo's worldview. They were bankers, socialites, cynical artists, all competing in a hierarchy of wealth and indifference. They came to Lorenzo's parties not to connect, but to be seen, to witness their host's latest display of power. They were an audience thirsty for anything that would break their existential boredom, and the humiliation of an autistic boy and his poor mother was just another exotic dish at the banquet. Samuel, on the other hand, was immune to all of this. The social hierarchy of the party was invisible to him. Lorenzo's status, the guests' expensive clothes, the mockery in their laughter, all of it was just noise, irrelevant data that his mind filtered out. He wasn't trying to fit in or impress anyone. He was in his own world, observing the refraction of light in the champagne, calculating the acoustics of the room, noticing the small imperfections that no one else saw. The conflict was that Lorenzo was trying to make Samuel a piece in his game, but Samuel wasn't even aware that a game was being played. He operated by a completely different set of rules, the rules of physics and mathematics, which do not bow to money or power. The tension in the room was the friction between these two operating systems. Lorenzo tried to impose his narrative of mockery and power, while Samuel, by his mere existence, represented a deeper, more incorruptible truth. The turning point of the evening did not begin with Samuel's genius, but with the arrogance of another man. Dr. Alistair Finch, the astronomer, was a lesser version of Lorenzo Vargas. Respected in his field but insecure and presumptuous, he saw Samuel's challenge as a way to show off to the host and participate in the joke. "Find the ring nebula for us," he shouted, a command designed to expose the boy's incompetence and generate laughter. That was the crucial mistake. He changed the battlefield. He took the focus off social mockery and put it on a test of technical competence. He unwittingly gave Samuel the only thing in the world he understood, a clear problem with a precise solution. The silent turning point was Samuel's walk to the telescope. The entire room held its breath, waiting for the punchline. The confused boy, perhaps knocking over the expensive equipment. But Samuel moved with a calm purpose, an economy of movement that contrasted with the excitement of the party. He didn't touch the eyepiece, which confused everyone. He didn't need to look. He knew where the nebula was. His mind was a celestial planetarium. His fingers moved over the right ascension and declination adjustment knobs. It wasn't a random search. It was a typing of coordinates, like a pianist playing a chord he knows by heart. The hum of the telescopes. Small motors was the only sound in the room, a sound of precision amid the awkward silence. The turnaround was complete when he stepped away from the telescope and made his announcement. He hadn't just found the object. He had diagnosed a fault in the instrument and, by extension, In the astronomer's own work, your calibration lens is misaligned by 0.02 degrees. That's why your latest published images are blurred on the blue axis. The sentence was a neutron bomb. It didn't destroy the building, but it annihilated everyone inside it. The joke didn't just die, it turned around and bit the Joker and his entire audience. The boy who was supposed to be the object of ridicule had just become the intellectual authority in the room, exposing the incompetence of an expert and the empty cruelty of everyone else. The silence that followed was no longer one of mockery. It was one of shock, shame, and growing dread. Lorenzo Vargas's game had just been turned upside down by the most unlikely player. From the moment Samuel spoke, the power dynamics in the room disintegrated and were rebuilt in real time. The victories that followed were quick, brutal, and sweet for Katerina, who watched everything with tears in her eyes. The first victory was Dr. Finch's reaction. The astronomer, pale as a ghost, rushed to the telescope. He looked through the eyepiece, then checked the settings. He grabbed his cell phone, opened one of his recently published images, and zoomed in. The expression on his face went from disbelief to horror and finally to crushing humiliation. He looked at Samuel, his mouth open, speechless. The authority of the expert had been publicly dismantled by a teenager in a second-hand suit. The second victory was the crowd's reaction. The shocked silence gave way to a frenzied murmur. People were no longer laughing. They were looking at Lorenzo Vargas, the host, the master of ceremonies, waiting to see how he would deal with the collapse of his own show. Their faces no longer showed contempt for Samuel, but a mixture of admiration for him and growing discomfort with their host. The joke had become distasteful, and no one wanted to be associated with it. They began to move away from Lorenzo, creating a power vacuum around him. The third and most important victory was for Katerina. She, who had felt like the smallest person in the room, suddenly found herself the center of a new kind of attention. An elegantly dressed woman approached her. "My name is Dr. Eva Rostova. I am the dean of the physics department at the university," she said, her voice low and respectful. "Your son, what he did, is extraordinary. I would very much like to speak with you." She handed Katerina her card. Other people approached, no longer to mock but with genuine and respectful curiosity. Samuel, oblivious to all this, had already found a book on the coffee table and was completely absorbed in it. He had solved the problem, told the truth, and as far as he was concerned, the event was over. He wasn't looking for applause or validation. His victory wasn't social, it was factual. But for his mother, every look of respect, every murmur of admiration, was a cure for the wounds of humiliation she had suffered. She straightened up, her shame replaced by fierce pride. The night that began as her greatest humiliation was becoming her greatest redemption. Lorenzo Vargas remained frozen in the middle of his opulent hall, the champagne glass forgotten in his hand. The noise of the party had been replaced by a buzz of conversations he no longer controlled. He was a king whose castle had been conquered by a force he could not comprehend. And for the first time in his adult life, he felt small. His thoughts spiraled into shock and disorientation. He had always believed that genius was something that could be identified, bought, displayed. It was a degree from a prestigious university, a famous award, a painting sold for millions. He collected geniuses like he collected rare cars. They were objects that reflected his own status and good taste. But Samuel didn't fit into any of his categories. He had no credentials. He didn't have a polished speech. He had no interest in impressing anyone. His genius wasn't a product to be consumed. It was a force of nature like lightning or an earthquake. It was pure, indifferent, and absolutely real. Lorenzo looked at Dr. Finch, the astronomer, who was being discreetly consoled by some colleagues. He had paid a fortune to have that man at his party, to lend an air of intellectual legitimacy to the event. And a boy, the son of his cleaning lady, had exposed him with a single sentence. The irony was so thick he could almost suffocate in it. He realized the true nature of his joke. He wasn't mocking an autistic boy. He was mocking the very idea that value and genius could exist outside his metrics of wealth and power. He was mocking something he didn't understand, and the universe, in a poetic twist, used the very object of his mockery to teach him a devastating lesson about his own ignorance. What he saw that night was the difference between knowledge and truth. His guests, his cured geniuses, had knowledge. They could quote philosophers, discuss art, debate theories. But Samuel had access to a more fundamental truth, the truth of the laws of the universe, which don't care about parties or bank accounts. The millionaire, the man who had everything, realized he was spiritually destitute. He was surrounded by beauty, but he lacked the ability to recognize it in its purest form. The party wasn't just over, it was exposed, and he, the host, was revealed as the poorest man in the room. The party quickly broke up. The guests, sensing the awkwardness in the air, found excuses to leave, leaving Lorenzo Vargas in his silent hall, which now seemed vast and empty. Katerina, clutching Dr. Rostova's precious card as if it were a winning lottery ticket, approached. "Samuel, let's go home, my son," she said softly. As they walked toward the exit, passing the defeated host, Lorenzo called after them. His voice, usually a booming baritone, was weak. "Wait." Katerina and Samuel stopped and turned around. Lorenzo walked up to them. He didn't look at Katerina. He looked at Samuel, who finally looked up from his book. For the first time, Lorenzo didn't see an object of curiosity, but a human being, and he was speechless. He, the master of rhetoric, didn't know what to say. Finally, he said the only true thing he could say. "I apologize." The word sounded strange, rusty, in his mouth. He turned to Katerina. "What your son did, I would like to finance his education. Any school, any university in the world, everything." Katerina looked at the powerful man, now reduced and humiliated. She saw the offer for what it was, an attempt to buy absolution, to turn the event into another one of his transactions. With a dignity she didn't know she possessed, she shook her head. "Thank you, Mr. Vargas, but I think we'll be fine." She took Samuel's hand, and together they left the mansion, leaving Lorenzo alone with his wealth and his newfound shame. Hope does not lie in Lorenzo's offer of money, but in Katerina's refusal. Hope lies in Dr. Rostova, who saw the talent and not the label. The final scene is not in the mansion, but weeks later. Samuel is in the university observatory, not as a visitor, but as a protege of Dr. Rostova. He is showing her and a group of graduate students something on a computer screen, his hand tracing patterns that only he can see. Katerina watches from a small gallery above, no longer an invisible cleaning lady, but the proud mother of a genius. A millionaire's cruel joke did not destroy her son. Instead, it catapulted him to his true destiny, proving that the gravity of talent is always stronger than the lightness of mockery. A person's worth is never determined by their place at the party, but by their ability to silence the room with the truth. Genius doesn't ask for permission, just an opportunity to shine. If this story about poetic justice and the triumph of talent left you applauding, leave your like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. We want to know, what hidden talent do you have or admire in someone else? Share this video. It may be the inspiration someone needs to never underestimate the power of a quiet mind.